Do you think the retaliatory measures make sense?
Yes, I do. Somebody in this business, somebody puts a tariff on your products, you put a tariff on theirs. Now, how it's received on the other side is something else, but that's life.
I actually like Justin. You know, I think he's good. I like him, but he shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. That's going to cost him a lot of money.
No one will benefit from this beggar thy neighbor dispute. The price will be paid, in part, by American consumers and American businesses. And the price will also be paid by those who believe that a rules-based system is worth preserving.
There were tariffs, a press conference, a number of tweets, and a war of words. That was former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney on Monday, President Trump on Tuesday, and Chrystia Freeland just yesterday, all trying to make sense of a relationship that has been one of the most stable bilateral friendships in the world, maybe not quite so much anymore. No one else we'd rather ask to take on the entire Canada-U.S. relationship in about 10 minutes. At issue, Chantal, Hébert and Andrew Coyne, both in Toronto today, and Paul Wells is here with me in Ottawa. Good to see you all. Let's start with the latest comment that we saw there, this speech given by Chrystia Freeland. We just showed a little piece of it, but it was a fascinating speech to listen to and to read because it seemed, to me anyway, to go in the opposite direction maybe of what the government has been saying it would do, and that is perhaps upping the ante. But maybe I'm misreading it. So Chantal, how did you take those comments last night?
I did not take them as upping the ante from the Prime Minister's comment. I took them as in framing the issue in a larger sense and a larger context of just this, we're going to go after your milk and we're going to go after your steel issue, and trying to position it as something that goes beyond trade experts fighting each other and tweets by politicians.
Paul, what did you think of it?
It's another demonstration of the Trudeau government's decision to contrast with Trump. When the Democrats used to say, when he goes low, we'll go high. When he goes erratic, the Canadians have decided to go consistent. So they've already announced they've already announced their slate of policies. They're going to pursue their slate of policies. The ante will up itself because the tariffs, the Canadian tariffs, haven't been introduced yet. They'll be introduced on Canada Day. And so, American importers are going to start yelling, in mid-afternoon of July 1st, and then we'll see whether the president listens to them more than he listens to Canadian officials.
Derek Burney was on Power and Politics today, and at one point he says, listen, you're not going to win with the master of distraction, Andrew. So I don't know. These are really good analysis of what that speech was. I just wonder who's listening and does it matter?
Well, there's two audiences listening. One is to play the political audience at home, and that's always going to be part of any of this show, is how is it playing with the folks back home.
Sure.
But partly also it's trying to reach non-Trump people in the United States, particularly people who might be in a position to influence them. And that's really, all these things have to be measured against is what will work, not what feels good. I know there's a mood in the country right now, let's hit them as hard as we possibly can, and let's say the nastiest things we possibly can. That would feel really good. It's questionable how much good it would do. And I remain a skeptic about the value of the retaliatory tariffs, but we'll see. But there's a middle path we have to strike here, and I'll say on both sides, because you're also getting people say, oh, how dare the Prime Minister even say what he said after the G7? How dare he even say, well, we're not going to be pushed around on this, which is anodyne standard issue rhetoric, because we're not allowed to say anything depending on how Trump reacts. So we can't also be walking around in stocking feet. There's some kind of middle path where we're not gratuitously offending them, but preserving a bit of national dignity.
Right. So, I mean, the Prime Minister's explanation, his office's explanation for that press conference was, oh, these are just things he said before. The president, should have known, and we heard the fallout from that. So I guess the question then, Chantal, is what is the point in ever responding if we never know how someone who is clearly behaves erratically might react?
Because we, the other audience, need to know where our government is. And until those tweets came, no one had thought that the Prime Minister had made news at that news conference.
No. Yeah.
And he would have made news if suddenly his answer from the week before had become something else. And then the next question would have been, how come you changed your tone? Did something happen on the one-on-one meeting?
Right.
And then he would have been, if anything happened, giving details about a private conversation with the president that may or may not result in anything. The other point of what has happened over the past week is to send the message to those who are watching in the U.S., and there are a lot of U.S. who are Canadian watchers, that on this issue, the Prime Minister is on fairly large consensus ground, i.e. Canada's political class, while it may quarrel with this or that in the approach, is by and large not saying Justin Trudeau has mishandled this and we need to do this or we need to do that. And on the tariffs, the approval rating for the retaliatory tariffs tell you that if you're going to ask at some point Canadians for concessions at the NAFTA table, you have to convince them that you fought the good fight for them.
Yeah. The interesting thing with some stuff that Chrystia Freeland was saying today, Paul, was she was actually trying to separate the tariffs from NAFTA, because she did come out of this meeting today with the promise that negotiations for NAFTA would continue through the summer. And the tariffs were some matter about national security over here. I get why she's trying to do that. I'm not sure that I buy that they're not related.
Yeah, well, there's no evidence that they're separated in the president's mind. And at the end of any negotiation, the decision goes back to the president. It seems pretty clear that about 2 weeks ago they were very close to a deal, and that the president decided he didn't like it, and so his own officials, Lighthizer and the others, had to had to retreat. And so we're heading into kind of the maddening period of this relationship, where.
We're just heading into it now.
Yeah. Oh man, it was just a field of clover until now, I'll tell you. Because now this president's going to say whatever he wants, and we now know for sure that his negotiators have no autonomous power to negotiate as long as he disagrees. And Canadian officials, the foreign minister and the prime minister first above them, have to keep being just maddeningly even keel and responsible, and even though it's now paying no perceptible dividends.
Yeah.
Andrew, go ahead. Well, there's much larger stakes here than just NAFTA, for one thing. You mentioned this at the outset, Rosie, that this is, when we see the Trump modus operandi here, this isn't just about tariffs or North American trade, it's about his whole view and his administration's view of international agreements and international alliances altogether. And it's pretty clear that he's on a mission to bust up as many of them as he possibly can. So we are the collateral damage at this point in that, and really all we can do, we the government, we the country, is try and, I think, play for time. Just try and mitigate the damage, try and prevent things from blowing up, hopefully try and prevent a bust-up on NAFTA, but being prepared for even that to happen. But, I don't think there's any win-win-win situation that's anytime soon.
Okay, we only have about 4 minutes, so I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'm going to utter the word supply management, and somehow we're going to make all that work in 4 minutes. Because this is an interesting example, Maxime Bernier saying things that are not new or surprising, and again, published, I think it was still on his website from before, his views on some of these issues. And he gets slapped in the face and kicked out of the shadow cabinet, presumably because he's speaking out against some things, but also calling into question an issue that, while the government is on side about it, presumably is up for debate as a policy issue. So I wonder, is this just about Andrew Scheer and Maxime Bernier? Is this about the issue of supply management? Are we no longer allowed to say anything critical about anything because we're negotiating? Chantal.
Imagine if Michael Chung, who also ran for the leadership on a platform that said it's time for the Conservative Party to embrace a carbon tax and lost, showed up tomorrow with a long excerpt in the Globe and Mail to say how he lost the leadership because some lobbies went behind others, the oil lobbies or others, and the carbon tax is the only way to go. What would we say? We'd say Michael Chung is in the shadow cabinet. The party policy on this is clear, crystal clear. And this debate is a debate that the party has to have at its convention or it has to have at caucus. But you cannot have someone in a shadow cabinet going against what the leader has identified and campaigned on as a core policy. And Andrew Scheer did campaign in favor of supply management. They have embraced supply management. They're using it on the campaign trail in Quebec. And on that basis, it's not just the freedom of expression issue. To me, it's an issue of the solidarity that you expect from people who are members of a shadow cabinet.
Paul, your view on that?
Pierre Trudeau, John Turner, Brian Mulroney, Jean Chrétien, their leaderships were all undone, not by the people they were facing, but by lieutenants in their own party who decided they'd have enough of them being the leader. So it's no wonder that leaders are a little paranoid about voices of dissent from within. I'm surprised that Max Bernier is still part of the Conservative caucus. I think the leader went easy on him.
Andrew.
I'm not as persuaded of that.
I know you're not. Like, go ahead and try and persuade us.
Well, I'm not persuaded that it's the member or the shadow cabinet member's job always to do what's best for the leader, what's most convenient for the leader. I think it matters what the truth of the matter is. It matters what the issue is. It matters whether the party is taking a stand that it can really live with and support, whether the party, in fact, believes in that itself, or large sections of it don't. It matters how the leader did, in fact, get into his job, and it's not illegal to point that out. I don't think Max was being quite as off the territory as people are claiming he was being. I think they were looking for an excuse to kind of make trouble because they wanted to move him away, and this was a convenient pretext to do it. If they just ignored it, I don't think anybody would have known it was on his website, that chapter of his book.
Okay, but for 30 seconds, Chantal, is this an indication, just broadly, that supply management is this sacred cow now that everyone seems to think it is?
Well,
like we can't even talk about it?
You can talk about it all you want, but it is a sacred cow for an Andrew Scheer-run party because he got elected on it. And so if he were tomorrow to say, I don't believe in this anymore, he would be the new Peter MacKay, who signed to say, I'll never negotiate with the Conservatives to become the leader of the Tory party, and then turned around and did that, except he'd do it on an issue of substance. So you either think that someone campaigns on something and then it is something that he will defend or not. So for the Conservatives, yes, it is a sacred cow to them until further notice.
And for the rest of us as well, it would seem. Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Good news for all of you who love politics as much as all of us do. At Issue is also a podcast. You get everything we talked about here and a little extra. This week on the podcast, all three major party leaders are hitting the by-election campaign trail in Quebec. Who will walk away with the win, and why the heck does it matter? Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational.